Hi, I'm Stephen Pedigo. I'm with the Director of Research for the Creative Class Group, and I'm pleased to introduce to you our next panel conversation. Can a city be turned around by one wealthy enthusiast? This is the question today that as many entrepreneurs start to look at cities as the ultimate startup. Many of us are very familiar with the story of the online shoe retailer Zappos and its founder, Tony Hsieh. While remaining CEO, tech sensation Hsieh sold Zappos to Amazon for $1.2 billion. Not a bad paycheck. He's now committed about $350 million of his own dollars to the Downtown Project to help transform his company's new neighborhood in downtown Las Vegas. East Fremont, just 2 miles from the famous Strip District where the Downtown Project is taking place. The project has brought 60 acres, 100 buildings, and has promised seating to more than 50 small businesses. Previously, check cashing operations and pawn shops had been replaced with hipsters bars, restaurants, and co-working spaces. Not to mention, Zappos now anchors the neighborhood from the former City Hall building. Despite its successes, there's been many challenges and bumps in the road, as reported by the media. This brings us to a key question. What lessons can we learn from the do-it-yourself approach like that of the Downtown Project? How important is authenticity? Joining Rana for a conversation is Maggie Su from the Downtown Project. Please welcome her to the stage.
Thank you, Stephen. Maggie, as Stephen said, is Chief of Staff and Vice President of Business Development for the Downtown Project, and she's also Chief of Staff to Tony Hsieh. And Tony is a truly internet sensation. This Harvard grad at the age of 26 sold Link Exchange to Microsoft for $265 million. He's a venture capitalist, and we had the opportunity to work with Tony in Las Vegas about 5 or 6 years ago when you guys were first thinking about moving Zappos headquarters from the suburbs of Henderson to East Fremont in downtown Las Vegas. Can you tell us about how that was received with Zappos employees and associates?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully this is working. In about 2010, Zappos was growing pretty rapidly, and they were looking to expand their headquarters and needed more space, and so started looking at campus models such as Facebook and Google and Nike. But it just so happened that the old City Hall downtown was empty at the time and was the perfect size. It was for 1,500 employees. And they kind of started thinking about a more integrated campus model such as an NYU, where the company and the campus wasn't isolated, it really was integrated into the city. At the time, downtown Vegas was thought of as a fairly unsafe neighborhood, and so the employees were hesitant to move. And so that's when Tony decided to found the Downtown Project and commit $350 million of his own money into revitalizing the downtown core.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about Tony's philosophy is he wanted to remove the office walls and make the city the backdrop for working and living. So I think his philosophy was he wanted to create a space where these serendipitous interactions could happen, where a developer can run into a programmer at a coffee shop and the next big Twitter or Facebook could happen. Is that really happening?
Absolutely. I mean, there's an oft-cited term, collisions, that we use, return on collisions, and I think the best way of explaining it is most traditional real estate developers look at a standard ROI. We've developed this notion of a return on collisions, community return on luck, and the idea of walking around and having a set of people in this downtown core who are very open to idea sharing. So it's the first place I've ever lived where people just start talking to you in the elevator or on the street or at the coffee shop, and there's this bias towards collaboration. And so, in an extreme case, you have two people meeting and they end up founding a company. On a day-to-day scale, it just happens over and over and over again, whether it's at weekly community dinners or at a music jam session or at a conference, and that's something that we've seen quite a bit.
So it's no longer the tech campus corridor landscape or the far-fetched tech office in some outskirts of town, but it's actually the city that's the laboratory now. Is that correct?
Yeah, and one of the things that we focused on is adding co-working and Wi-Fi throughout the city and throughout our properties, and that was very intentional, was to disaggregate the traditional campus. And so you see a lot of people out. One of the most interesting examples is Turntable Health, which is a subscription medical clinic that we launched, and it's an amazing facility. It's, you have a doctor and a health coach that you can text, you can call 24 24 hours a day, preventive care. And what's interesting is people co-work in the lobby of the medical clinic. And that's not a place, you wouldn't really want to co-work in your normal doctor's office. And it's this great space to hang out with yoga and nutrition classes.
Oh, that's cool. So we have up on the screen what the downtown project kind of looks like. Do you want to explain a little bit more detail?
Sure. Just a couple images of the container park. So this was an old Motel 6 that we knocked down, and at the time, this is right on East Fremont. It wasn't an area that I personally would have felt comfortable standing at, and I think we just have a couple photos of the container park and the activation there. And the goal is really twofold. One was as a retail incubator, so in many ways it's an outdoor mall, and there's an opportunity for families to come and hang out, and for these first-time entrepreneurs to test out their concepts. The middle, what you're seeing is actually a Swiss Family Robinson treehouse, and so the idea was a family-friendly location, and for local native Las Vegans, there weren't many spaces to take their children. There weren't many outdoor park spaces, and so this really, really transformed our community. We actually just hit 2 million visitors. It's been open about a year and a half, and for us, that was a pretty amazing milestone.
Okay. So I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I'm all for cheerleaders coming into a city, investing their time, money, and resources to serve as a catalyst for change. But Tony has gotten his fair share of media critics. If you Google Tony Hsieh and the Downtown Project, you'll see some of them. The Guardian actually called this an outlandish experiment of urban revival. How do you approach that?
So I would say it's definitely an experiment, and it's definitely unusual. I don't think I would go as far as to say outlandish. One of our principles has been constant experimentation, and I think what's interesting is that being able to do that on a citywide scale is not something many governments can do, for example, and we've really wanted to do that. But at the same time, when you experiment, sometimes things don't work, and I think that's where we've been challenged, where concepts such as a food and beverage concept or a tech company might not work, and the company has to pivot or fail or shut down. And so our philosophy has really been building the ecosystem and strengthening the skills within that. And I've actually had some friends and entrepreneurs, their companies have shut down and they've gone on to either work for Downtown Project or do something else, and then left Downtown Project and gone to start something else. And so we really see that ecosystem of skill building across tech, fashion, Zappos customer service. There's a really great service industry, food and beverage, as really being what's out there. But to the experiment point, one interesting thing is Gold Spike, and Gold Spike was this old casino bar. It had dollar strip blackjack, and it's kind of a seedy, dirty place, and we ended up pulling out all the gaming and making it into a co-working space. And what I think is interesting is the backyard of the Gold Spike started as a parking lot, and we ended up having giant games, and so we had giant Jenga and giant darts and giant cornhole. Decided to put in an ice rink in the backyard because who doesn't like to go ice skating? So put in fake ice. Pretty much no one went ice skating, and for us, that was an example of that concept isn't working. What is? We checked the Yelp reviews, and it really was this giant game. It was a place for the locals to hang out and feel like it was their bar. And so in the backyard, we just added giant billiards, giant beer pong, all these giant games. And on the weekends, it is absolutely packed. You cannot move. And so that really was, you didn't have to open physical space. That was finalized. Yeah. And I think taking that beta testing approach and bringing it to physical space is something that's very unique.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, this is 2 miles from the Strip, and just a few years ago, this was a desolate wasteland of seedy check cashing operations and pawn shops, and now it's this big, amazing outdoor mall and interesting collection of co-working spaces and bars. So how have you engaged the local community?
Yeah, so what I think is interesting here is we didn't hold the traditional town hall when we first started, and I think that was misinterpreted in many ways. And instead of having a one-time or a few-time public forum for people to engage, it happened on an everyday basis. And so when I go out on the street, I was at the bank the other day, and my bank teller started telling me an idea. Tony personally gives his email address out to every single time he speaks. It's tony@zappos.com. You can email him; he'll read it. And every single one of our employees, we have a lot of frontline employees who are bartenders and cashiers and waiters, and they're getting that feedback and giving that feedback. So it's a constant process, but we didn't have the let's all come together and formally share ideas, and that's where I think we actually now have something called a monthly downtown lowdown where we share ideas. We invite local businesses up to update us, but really the power for us is the collisionable time, the hour before that and the hour after that, where people are just mingling and getting to know each other and sharing ideas one-on-one.
Okay. And one of the elements of the downtown project has been to attract tech startups. How successful has that been, and how can other communities do that?
So we've invested in over 130 tech startups, and this is actually a picture of Life is Beautiful. I think you can go to the next slide. That it's a 3-day festival in downtown, 90,000 people. It was music, art, culinary, learning. What I think was interesting about that is that it was in the fabric of the city, and so our lack of density actually worked for us. And this is an empty parking lot where we added a stage, and the Killers and Kings of Leon, Imagine Dragons performed. So this is an example of the type of programming that we wanted to bring in, and to get that inflow of people and diversity. On the tech startup side, we don't invest in any single industry, and again, I think that sometimes confuses people because we have everything from your traditional apps to a company that 3D prints limited edition cars, to a company that's making hot air balloons that go into outer space. And so there is no industry focus. We have a lot of fashion tech investments, but it's really about passionate people. And we found that there was actually a gap in what we were investing in. So originally we were looking at more of a seed stage post-accelerator funding model. We've actually found that there was a need for increased mentorship at the accelerator stage. So we recently launched an accelerator called The Mill, just finished the first cohort. And we even have an idea seed stage accelerator called The Mill Ideas. It's $5,000 to an entrepreneur. Last year, they gave $5,000 to a different entrepreneur every single week. Did it about 40 times throughout the year. And to be able to test again in that minimum viable product way without having to quit your job, this was enough to say, could this idea work? Because not every good idea, right, is a good business.
So does the downtown project also offer mentorship abilities to the companies that you're funding?
Yeah, we actually funded a company called Rocketeer that is a free in-house consulting service for both downtown project investments as well as shops and businesses that are located within, let's say, things like the container park. And so that company is made up of an ex-CEO, CFO, CMO, COO. They have all those skill sets because most of the companies just starting out don't have that full C-suite of skills, and we can complement that quite easily.
Okay. So other than the investments of the downtown project, are local organizations coming in and setting up shop on their own? And if so, how many and what types of organizations?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a great mix, especially on the partnership side. So again, with the local university, and Tony's been very explicit about not wanting to depend on buildings or stadiums or research facilities, but we found a great partnership with UNLV, and so having them actually come downtown and teach classes downtown. We've done partnerships with other universities around their architecture programs, having the classes look at certain buildings that we weren't actively looking to develop and coming up with ideas for that. We've done a lot of nonprofit partnerships as well. So we actually funded kind of a walking street team called the Downtown Rangers. And so a friendly face, they can team walk you, and they did a lot of homeless outreach. And we've actually spun that out into a separate homeless outreach initiative.
Okay. And what's the next phase of the downtown project? What do you hope to see?
I mean, everything we've done is with a model to scaling, and I spent the morning with some folks at Bedrock and going to be at Rock Ventures tomorrow, and it's amazing to see, what's going on between here and Detroit, and we're kind of laughing. Everything from, thinking about smart parking garages, so the Z Garage, and the murals and the alleyways, and so we're actually working on an alleyway project that I'm going to take back some of those ideas from the Belt, but with us, again, everything. It started in Vegas, but it wasn't meant to just stay in Vegas, and so this people-based approach is so important to us. Not wanting to prescribe what we were going to build, but creating the conditions that were ripe for innovation. So really planting those seeds and allowing others to thrive with their ideas, and that's something that holds true for any city. We've talked a lot with Santa Fe and Sacramento and some other cities in the region, as well as cities in Brazil and Korea and lots of Canadian cities that have come and wanted to learn from us, and vice versa. And so there's some really, really interesting non-traditional models of development, redevelopment, revitalization out there.
So how do you bring it to another city? Do you have to have one major investor to champion this and stand up and say, well, I'll do this, this looks interesting, or how does that model fit into other cities?
And I think that's always the big question, because a lot of people come and say, we have all these great ideas, we have a business improvement district, we have a group of citizens, but we don't have that funding source. And I think that's, no pun intended, the $1 million question. it can come from a mix. We personally didn't take federal, state, city funding. I think that's a very interesting proposition for some folks. Or a group of private investors coming together. In Santa Fe, it was really, the group we're talking to is a mix of the creative, the arts group, the mayor, a few other, the Santa Fe Institute, and then coming together and using the resources that they have.
So what values and what ethos do you look for in the companies that you choose to put in the downtown project? And then the same question for the type of cities that you think this would work in.
I think the biggest thing we found is a willingness to learn and grow and a curiosity. And again, to stress this, a diversity of perspectives and thoughts. And so we started with this great customer service culture of the Zappos employees, and we had, we explicitly invested in tech. We explicitly invested in small businesses. There's so many areas, music, the creative arts, the performing arts. We're just looking into hydroponics and aquaponics, and there are all these different things. And so one of the challenges we've had is actually with scope and scale, because your work is never really done, right? If you're in a business like Zappos selling shoes, you want to sell more shoes. With a city, you could spend years thinking about any one topic. And so for us, we're just excited to have all that energy together.
And what's the what are the qualities of the city that you think would embrace a project like this?
I mean, again, I think it's any city, and what I've been kind of surprised by is almost every city we've talked to has some sort of group of people, and anything from a tech community, a co-working. I think not every city is going to be the next Silicon Valley, and they shouldn't want to be. One of the things we joke about is an excellence in fire art. And that's actually how I got reconnected with Detroit, was through Bacon, who's a local artist, and brought this dragon art card to our Halloween parade. And so, could we be a city of fire? Could we be a city for 3D printing? What are the areas of excellence in any city that they could really highlight? And so for us, it's just helping different cities, pull those things out.
Yeah. And so Zappos, as you may have known, claim to fame was delivering happiness, and its motto of delivering happiness. And Tony wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Delivering Happiness. Does that same philosophy carry over to the downtown project?
So I think that's, in my mind, actually a misnomer. With customer service delivering happiness, it makes sense. It's a very clear company culture. And there's been a lot written about, being downtown as an individual and feeling like you constantly have to be happy. What I think is interesting is, if you're at a company, I came from New York consulting, and an employee leaves, or you let someone go, or they quit, you pretty much never see them again. But you can't fire your neighbor, right? Your neighbor is there. And at least having the community we live in, it's a really small and tight-knit community, and people really care about each other. And so I think the kind of the social norm is to be curious and excited. I'd say more it's about delivering passion and helping people get to where they want to be. And I love the idea of, not optimizing for net worth, but, optimizing for what you want to be doing.
Yeah. So most everyone probably here has visited the Strip. How do you get tourists to leave the Strip and visit the downtown project?
So I think getting people to come to Vegas is not a hard stretch.
Right.
I actually would like to invite you all to come to Vegas. Send me a note. We actually, for the past few years, we've kept a collection of furnished apartments called Crash Pads, which we invite people to stay at. Now we just opened up a boutique hotel, so if you want to come stay at the hotel, let me know. And I personally have friends who come for conferences, bachelor parties. I know some of you were in Vegas for the real estate conference. And so it's just getting them that extra 10 minutes up the Strip. It's been really interesting to see the development of the SLS and the other casinos that are kind of pushing north, as well as the Fremont Experience that's pushing east. And so we're really trying to connect this corridor of UNLV. There's a medical clinic that's being built, medical area. There's a lot going on in the downtown area. There's a really great arts district that's just right adjacent to where we are. And so if you want to come, we invite you to come downtown and to spend half a day there, a couple of days, and just check it out for yourselves. And for us, in many ways, that's the most effective marketing, because everybody gets something different out of it. And I have friends who lived downtown for a few months and then decided to leave, and it just wasn't for them. And we have other people who actually had a guy who had a meeting with me, loved it so much, ended up staying, moving, shipping all his stuff from New York out, never even went back to New York, and he now works for a local drone company, and he was previously a financial analyst. And so I think Vegas, one of the billboards that we had for a while was downtown Vegas makes you smarter if you know where to look, and that's something where you don't associate Vegas with this the desire to co-learn. We've done a lot of free programming around lectures and talks, and as well as adult education.
It is a refreshing reprieve from the Strip, even if you just go for a few hours. So your parents went to the University of Michigan. You've spent some time here. You toured some of Detroit this morning. What are your suggestions for Detroit's rebirth and regrowth?
I think what I loved was the programming and the festivals and the music, and so for us, Life is Beautiful was really a great way to drive a lot of people into downtown Vegas to see it and at its best, its most exciting. And so I love what's been going on with the really light and quick activations of the streetscape and of the beach and the plazas, and I think continuing to do things like that. These aren't capital intensive things that you have to do. It's a person with an idea getting together a group of people, and that's really what it comes down to. And if there's enough interest, people will support you. What I thought was interesting, there's a model in Vancouver, there's a food hall, and they actually, each of the businesses commit to pulling out a bit of their profit into a fund, a collective investing fund, and they then vote on the empty spaces. And so they give new entrepreneurs an opportunity to go into that, and I think that's a really, really cool idea.
Yeah, that's great. So everyone's big on failure these days, and that failure is a way to achieve your success, and now they even have, I think, a conference called FailCom in Silicon Valley. What are some of the failures that you've met across the way, and what have you learned from those?
I mean, I think one of the, just lagging indicators has been residential, and the failure in that we didn't address it. So there's actually a huge demand for residential downtown, and we're about a year or two behind, and so we're really trying to accelerate that. I think our biggest area of growth is really around, just listening to people, and there's been a lot written about Zappos and holacracy, and the fact that each person and holacracy, the 30 seconds is it's an organizational structure that doesn't have traditional bosses.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
everyone
No
is
bosses.
their
Everyone's
own boss, a little bit of controlled chaos. And the reason holacracy actually got brought to Zappos was to mimic a city. So in a city, there's no central planning commission that says, go do this or that. It's just people who are sensing things that they want to improve. And I think, if anything, for us to have even more structure in helping people realize and reach their passions. And again, so sometimes, I think the level of technical talent in Vegas, we're still trying to build up that base. And so working with the schools, we've had a couple companies leave. They've had to relocate because they weren't able to pull that technical talent that they needed. So really building that up as well.
So it's really exciting. Well, thank you for coming from Las Vegas to join us today and being in Detroit. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.